As you know, I'm Ed Parcaut, host of Real Estate Jerky, the radio show. And then we do these lives when we have the person either going to had been on the radio or going to be coming on the radio. And we have retired Judge Stephen C. Bailey, who is running for, is it District 4?
District 4.
Yeah. Well, thank you for being on the show today.
Probably ought to tell them State Senate.
State Senate, District 4. Sorry, I guess. Yeah. That's why I have you here. You can tell me what I'm doing wrong. I haven't had many times in front of judges, so now you can, make it up for me.
That's it.
Yeah. All right. So I want everybody to know who you are, what you stand for, and what are we going to do differently in California that you want to see those changes. So how long were you a judge?
8.5 years.
And then after, so then you must have been an attorney for many years.
18 before I went on the bench, and I've been practicing now for the last 5.
Okay.
Practicing.
Again.
As a lawyer, you never apparently get good. You have to practice your entire career. You just practice.
What I never understood is how, and then I could be wrong, but 2 attorneys go into a room, they'd say how bad each other's clients is or whatever, and then they walk out and go have a beer. I just don't understand how you guys do that.
Well, typically we don't go in and say bad things about the other client. You know what I mean? We talk about, the issues, the facts that, make our individual case the strong case. And if we've got a mediator or a judge or someone who's listening to this, the whole point is not to trash the other side, but to convince, advocate in this case, for your client's interests. And, a judge takes the facts that are presented and then applies the law to those facts. A lawyer, as they say, will apply the law to the facts, but spin it in a way most favorable to the client.
Gotcha. The reason I brought that up is because if you're able to do that, then you're able to talk to both sides. The one thing I always say is veterans are really good at taking the emotion out of what they're dealing with. And you are a veteran too. But that's something we've learned because you have to deal with things and not have your emotions take over. So as an attorney, you learn that also. So being in politics would seem to be the best next step.
Yeah, I mean, just to put a pin in that, the good attorneys learn to take the emotion out of it. There are too many people that are, have a license to practice law that don't take the emotion out of it. And that's where the breakdown comes. And, we see people who are totally emotional, which, I don't fault people for being emotional from time to time. But the bottom line is let's talk about the facts, like the old TV show from the 1950s and 60s, just the facts, man. And when you just deal with facts, I can present my set of facts, you can present your set of facts. And what we're really looking for is that common ground in the center. And I do think veterans do that a little bit better than the rest of society, because a veteran's called on, when they're on active service, they're called on to follow the order, but also use a little bit of common sense in the process. Because, orders give you the goal, but getting to that goal requires an individual to, formulate their own plan and then implement it.
All right. My next question really is for most people that are going into politics, first of all, why, right? Because it's not a fun game to be in for most people. If you're a logical person, and I don't mean, this is going to come off wrong no matter how I say it, so I apologize. But I'm just saying, if you go into it thinking that you can change the system and you're all this, and sometimes you get there and you can't do anything because people who are in it have been in it for so long, they don't want things to change. They just want to keep it the status quo. So how are you going to do that? Because I know we can talk about everything about your background and everything, but what are you going to do when you get elected? What's the first thing you want to do?
Well, the first thing I want to do is look for that common ground out there, regardless of what the issue is that we're dealing with, whether in our district it's water or the management of our resources, our forests, our agriculture. We want to find the common ground that we can make incremental changes to. For example, they don't turn a aircraft carrier 90 degrees immediately. It's a very incremental process. It takes a while to move. I mean, we've screwed California up pretty well, and we're pretty talented at that. Now we've got to kind of try to put the pieces back together, and to put the pieces back together ultimately means that I'm going to have to reach across the aisle. I'm a Republican. I consider myself a conservative Republican. I'm not going to surrender my convictions when I get to Sacramento. But what I am going to be looking for on issues such as, how can we make a meaningful commitment to controlling crime in the state? We've watched what happened in New York. That's happening in the streets of San Francisco and streets of Modesto, in Placerville, South Lake Tahoe, Bishop, which by the way is part of our district on the east side of the Sierras. Crime is the number one issue. Safety in our streets is the number one issue in the 4th State Senate District. Now, the social justice warriors have pretty well taken control of Sacramento, and they've been pushing to release people early from prison. They've been pushing to, dumb down our criminal justice laws. They've been very successful at that. Well, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to figure out that if you dumb down your criminal justice laws, make drugs and theft basically legal in California, let hardened criminals, violent criminals out of our state prisons early, you're going to get increase in crime. Well, there are some incremental things that we ought to do immediately. For example, I think there's bipartisan support to reduce the level of a theft felony down from $950 back to the $400 where it was, better than a decade ago. Why? Because if it's a felony over $400, that increases the consequence to the thief.
Right.
And if there's no consequence to a thief, they're going to go out and commit more thefts. And the current state of $950, it's not just $950, it's $950 in every place they want to steal from. Well, how many small businesses can support that kind of loss?
Not many. So, the big thing recently that I saw on TV, I'll bring up the whole 32 hours a week in a second, but I saw the president the other day talking about, the biggest problem we have right now is these ghost guns that are causing the problem, and it's guns that are causing the problem. I think it's exactly what you just said. It's the fact that the criminals are getting out early. We've made it to where it's a revolving. It seems like they can go do this and then they get out and they knock down to a misdemeanor. I mean, if you look at the trains in LA that were ransacked, that from that $950 that you just talked about, I mean, that's millions and millions of dollars. You could have 30 people on that train taking 1,000 each. We're talking millions of dollars, and it's a misdemeanor. We need to change those things. We need these people to think if you don't have consequences, you're going to do whatever.
Right. And the consequence has to be commensurate with the crime. A theft crime is, a major loss to a small business person. $950 from, this theft, $950 from another theft, another, and pretty soon all the profit that they can make in a month is gone. Doesn't take long, and it's not insurable, and you can't collect it. And ultimately, if you've now rewarded those criminals with the opportunity to go out and steal and then, fence the stolen goods, you're going to get more theft. And I don't want to keep going over the same thing again and again, but sometimes, people need to hear it more than one time. But ultimately, it is prosecute that theft, and you've got to make the punishment and I'm not talking about rehabilitation, I'm talking about straight punishment, the punishment has to fit that crime, and it has to be at a level that's going to convince the criminal that this isn't worth it, and they don't want to keep doing it.
Right. So we have to go back to common sense laws, is basically what you're saying.
Well, that would be nice.
Yeah.
I'm not quite to the point of thinking that I can go to Sacramento and get it, common sense.
Right.
I'm just looking for those narrow areas of common ground that we can have with the other side.
Right.
We're not going to change somebody's, philosophy who's up in Sacramento and thinks that social justice is the way to go. I'm going to let them go off and into their dreamland, but I want to find that common ground where they will say, I'm not going to get reelected if I don't support, Senator Bailey's change to reduce it to $400, or to make sure that a felony is state prison.
I mean, because if you look at what that has done, I mean, you got Walgreens are closed up in San Francisco, or CVS's that aren't there because they're getting ransacked, and other places. I think it's a common sense person, or the way this should be is this should be back down to where it was. It's not a lifestyle crime. That's what they tried to make it. They kept saying it was a lifestyle crime for people who are on drugs and everything, and so we shouldn't go after them. Well, they just made it for the criminals to do it, and because you're not going to be able to shut down all these sites where they can sell the product through. Right. I mean, that's the other issue, because they're saying, well, we need to shut down these sites that you can sell it through, because it used to be just a pawn shop. Well, we don't have that today. It's very difficult to shut down sites that are not here in California.
That's exactly right. There's got to be a federal and a state response to it. I do agree that we need to have some ability to monitor. And I think, some of these platforms can let us know if someone let law enforcement know that if somebody is consistently selling product that doesn't appear to be a manufactured product, where they're selling, if they're selling a TV and then they're selling, some other electronic good, and, it's inconsistent, they're selling them for well below market, well, maybe somebody ought to investigate it. Right. That doesn't mean you shut the site down, but it does mean that maybe law enforcement ought to investigate.
Or maybe they should make them put the serial numbers on the site.
Right.
Because if they had to put the serial number, then they know where they came from and what lot it was in and where it was stolen from.
That's it.
How about that? That's really easy right there. I just fixed it. So there, to go fix that.
But it's probably a little more complex than that. But on the other hand, that's a good idea.
Yeah, I mean, if it's electronics, you're not going to be able to do that for everything. But if electronics are stolen and sold, probably easier than anything else.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's what thieves are looking for. They're looking for product that they can steal, that they can sell cheap, because who's going to buy something if it's retail?
Right.
And used, because none of these things look like they're brand new. They're not in the box. So, somebody else, we could look into that.
Because you're right about certain things. We're being hit in the hole with that 47 or whatever. What was the Safe Neighborhoods Act that did all this?
Yeah, Prop 47.
Yeah. Can you, when you get up there, can you change it to where they have to name it for exactly what it is?
Yeah, I've always been convinced that, the Attorney General's office would be the ideal office if it were kept relatively nonpartisan. But it's become so incredibly political that the whole idea of writing a ballot title and summary, honestly, has been lost in the Attorney General's office. I'm intrigued by the idea that has been advanced by a number of legislators that authority ought to be taken away from the Attorney General, turned over to the Legislative Council's office. At least up to this point, the Legislative Council, obviously appointed by the California legislature to act as the attorney for the legislature. has been able to maintain a relatively nonpartisan approach to how they do their business, and that might be the place to move the authority from the Attorney General over to the Legislative Council to write the title, to write the summary for each ballot proposition. Probably not the total solution. We may need to put legislatively some limits on the authority of that office and to force an honest presentation to the voters. So far, that Prop 47 that you referred to, calling it the Safe Streets and Schools Act, was just a out and out lie, because it didn't do that. It wasn't designed to do that. And it did, as I mentioned before, that was the catalyst for dumbing down our theft and drug laws in California.
Yeah, I mean, maybe they were trying to make it safer for criminals. Maybe that's what it was.
Well, they were lying to us because the way they presented it, they didn't present that initiative as changing criminal justice laws necessarily. That wasn't the thrust of it. What the thrust was that we were going to save an incredible amount of money by making thefts, which had previously been felonies and might subject a person to state prison, and drug crimes, which we were being sold the bill of goods that they were victimless. Kind of a libertarian view that what a person put in their body was harmless and didn't affect anyone else, only the individual that used it. Well, we know now that that's not true. Wasn't true then. But what they sold it as is by reducing those to misdemeanors, we would have this huge cost savings, because we wouldn't be sending people to prison. They would get a modest county jail sentence. And by doing that, what you got out of it was all this extra money. And then they promised, this wasn't, like, gee, maybe this will happen. It was the explicit promise in that initiative that you were going to take that savings, and that savings was going to be immediately transferred back to the counties, so that the counties could develop programs that would go to, help a person that was poor, maybe homeless, and was forced into stealing, or somebody that was an addict. We would have all these drug programs. And what immediately happened is what always happens in Sacramento. As soon as there was some savings, they spent it someplace else. They didn't send it back to the counties. And so the counties were left with two things. One, an increased population that had to go into the county jail. County jails were built not as permanent criminal justice housing, but they were short-term facilities to incarcerate. That's why we developed prison systems around the country, because for long-term incarceration, for violent felons, you needed a prison. And so we were transferring those people originally out to the state prison system. Now we had decided we were going to reduce the state prison system. So the next thing they did was the legislature passed AB 109, which was, created early release. It began to order judges to reduce drug offenses retroactively, by the way. So a person who had a felony on their record, maybe a felony possession of drugs when they in fact were a drug dealer and had already gotten the benefit of their bargain. All of a sudden we had situations where judges, and I was one on the bench at the time, and I saw this happen, where people who were literally drug dealers who had pled it down to a simple possession were now coming in and telling the judge, reduce my sentence and then dismiss it. And And the law said I had to.
Wow.
And it was one of the reasons why I retired to run for Attorney General in 2018. One of the things I'm going to take up to Sacramento when I get elected to the state Senate is this knowledge of what actually happened. We can make some significant changes. So there's a number of changes we can make right now in AB 109. Prop 47, on the other hand, the problem we run in there is that the Constitution requires that the state legislature go back to the people for that change on Prop 47. Now, not every piece needs the people to weigh in, but some pieces do. To, for example, increase the penalty for petty theft, which is $950 or less of a theft, with a prior. So right now we've got gangs of thieves going out, stealing from the, for example, maybe Lowe's, and then they go over to Home Depot and they commit another theft. Everybody in the gang who goes in and commits that theft is a misdemeanor at that point, as long as they stay below $950. Take the calculator in, and that's pretty easy to do. We need to change those kinds of things. I mean, that's just common sense. If it's a gang theft, it ought to be treated as a gang crime, and ought to earn somebody a felony and a state prison commitment. Same is true if you go down the street and you steal from small businessman A and then small businesswoman B and then C and D. That's multiple thefts. We ought to be able to charge that as a felony. That would need the people to weigh in on. But I think most people confronted with these smash and grabs, or having seen them on TV, are ready to make that change. All we have to do as legislators is send it back to the people for them to vote on.
All right, I got to stop you there because we've been on this for about almost 10 minutes.
Yeah, that's the problem. I could probably talk for another hour.
You're attorney and then a judge, so of course. So a couple of the things I saw in your pamphlet: you're creating middle-class jobs, tackling the homeless epidemic. But one of the things I want to bring up, and we talk about common sense, is I saw on TV today that California is looking at moving from 40-hour work week to a 32-hour full-time work week. And that means if anybody works over 32 hours, they get overtime. So I think it's 500 or more employees, unless you're unionized and all this stuff. It's stuff like that makes you shake your head and say, where do I live? What more are they trying to do to California to make it so much worse for companies to be here? And then when I was talking, and I want you to talk about this in a second. And then the other thing is, our engineer from the show that we do, he texted me and said, "Man, I went through Del Taco today, and my burrito went up 20% in the last month." That's inflation. Those are things that are coming, and it's not going to go away real quick. So those two issues that we need to deal with, and how are you going to deal with those?
Yeah, I mean, the problem with inflation is that it's a national problem, and the state itself only has a modest approach to addressing inflationary problems. One of those approaches
by the way, there's water right there if you need it by your mic.
Yeah, well, that was.
I just want to make sure you had it in case you need it. It's there for you.
Okay.
All right.
So, one of the issues that I think would make a immediate impact here in California is a reduction in the gas tax. We have consistently over a number of years had a gas tax which was designed to fix the roads, build new roads, put in additional lanes into roads. Since the Imperial Freeway, we haven't built another freeway in California. We have not used the basic gas tax for road repair. That money has been siphoned off for every type of program you could imagine, but it doesn't account for roads. What we have in California is SB 1, which was passed back in 2017 and raised our gas tax again. That money that was in this special gas tax is going for road construction. I've always been an advocate. Number one, I did not support SB1 at the time. I don't support it today because I believe that we have more than sufficient money coming out of the basic gas tax to go to road repair. And that's what the gas tax was originally developed as, and that's where the money ought to go. It shouldn't be subsidizing every other type of transportation mode, including bicycles. Be honest with the people. If you want a bicycle tax, put a bicycle tax on so that people know that, they're paying for bike lanes. I think, I'm a bike person myself. I like biking, great exercise. But the fact of the matter is my money, my tax money shouldn't be spent on bike lanes unless I have been given the opportunity to approve of that. And I do not believe that's happened. So the first thing that could take place is we could do a 50-cent reduction or more in California's gas tax. And that would be an immediate impact on the price at the pump. When we are so dependent to move people from their home, which could be here in Stanislaus County, to who knows where in the Bay Area, that's an expensive proposition just to get to work. And we as legislators do have an obligation to try to reduce where we can the impact on our people, and that would make an immediate impact and would be. And I'm not talking about giving somebody $400. I'm talking about an immediate reduction that's permanent.
Right.
That it doesn't come back. It isn't something that's temporary.
The problem with that gas tax is because I listened to a local radio show and they had somebody on there saying we had a chance to get rid of it, but we all agreed to keep it. Well, again, it goes back to how they worded it on the ballot, so that most people, when they see a tax, they say no. And they say, so they knew the person was going to vote no. So in order to get rid of that tax, you had to vote yes, which is complete opposite of what people do. They know that. And so they worded it that way so that they would pass. And that was the worst thing they could have done. Those things right there are the worst thing. And when you talked about it, I don't want to bring it back up, so let's not go there. But the thing I was talking about, the cost, right? So inflation's making the cost for everything for a business owner even more, right? You got your supplies that you need, everything's costing more. Now your employees are costing more because they're raising the minimum wage or whatever they're doing. And then now inflation's coming in. They're saying, okay, now we only want a 32-hour work week. So now you're going to have a McDonald's employee making $24 an hour overtime for 8 extra hours a week. And that's what I was trying to get at, is they're trying to add on and add on to add on to these employers. So they're all going to leave.
Yeah, they're either going to leave or they're going to get smart and go robotic.
Right. Or hire people from the Philippines and other places where a lot of us have these virtual assistants who do all this work for so much less. And that's what I think a lot more companies are going to do.
Right. I mean, businesses, if they want to stay in business, right, whether it's here in California or anyplace else, are going to look for the most efficient way to provide the service. And in the case of, if you tell a business that they can only employ a person 32 hours, fine. The business will reflect that. They'll employ them for 32 hours. They're not going to employ them for 40 or 50 and pay time and a half. I don't care what the individuals the dreamers that are up in Sacramento, it must be in the water or something.
I don't know.
Either that or it's in the smoke that they're
too close to some of those shops around there.
Apparently, but the fact is, you can see robotics happening right now. You walk into a McDonald's, and where do you make your order? For the most part, you go to a kiosk now to make the order.
I haven't been in McDonald's, so I couldn't tell you.
Yeah, well, I went in there a couple times.
Okay.
I reflect that in the weight side.
All right. And I didn't say I didn't eat out. I just have not been at McDonald's in a long
Sure.
time. So,
But McDonald's is going to go more technological. It'll need fewer people. And when it needs fewer people, then there's more people who, don't have a job or don't have the job that they're qualified for. So, business will modify its operation. Some businesses will pack up and move to Texas. That's a detriment because those are really the best paying jobs out there are the ones that pack up and move. The fact of the matter is there will be a way to get around what these dreamers have in mind. And if they decide to go to a 32-hour work week, that's not going to benefit. It's not going to benefit the employees that they think it benefits.
because they're going to actually drop them down. Because a lot of times the companies only do give you 32 hours. That's your max right now. And you're not full time because of benefits and other things, because it's so getting so expensive here in California. So I see a lot of the headquarters going to move out of state. And then then they don't have the same laws like if they hired a person remotely, right? Because it's governed by the state where the headquarters is, right?
That's it.
Yeah, so they'll move into Nevada or they'll move to Texas, the headquarters. There could be only 3 people in the headquarters, and then the rest of the people work all over the country. And I think we're going to see a lot more of that, just less businesses. So there's going to be less of this surplus they keep spending in Sacramento. There's all this surplus and they're going, oh, this extra money. Well, give it back to the people you took it from.
That's exactly right. In talking about reducing costs in California, $52 billion surplus ought to be a $52 billion tax rebate to the taxpayers that have paid it.
Yeah, it shouldn't be a question. What should we do with it? I'll tell you right now, it shouldn't be any question. It should automatically be there. But then what would they do with all their social programs they want to have that most of us don't want to work on? So it's going to be really hard to help the middle class in California if they keep putting these laws in place that they think is going to help people.
Yeah, I mean, it's the dumb idea of the day coming out of Sacramento.
Right.
And, we've got to get, some new common sense back up to Sacramento.
And then we need to get a governor who doesn't get involved in all the little things he gets involved with. I heard on TV, like 2 attorneys just quit for something that the governor kept putting his nose into. Did you hear about that?
No, I didn't.
Yeah, it was something, and the governor kept asking questions, and the 2 top attorneys finally just quit and said, I'm not going to be part of this because he keeps putting his nose in this. I'm just saying he should focus on what a governor should focus on. And we do right now, we need to make some changes. We need to get back to a 2-party system in California, not a 1-party, because we're seeing where that's taking us. And most of us are in the middle. I don't care if you're a Democrat or Republican. Most of us are right there in the middle. We agree on a lot of stuff. There's a couple of things we don't agree on. That's okay. We can get along. But it's the right and the left that's destroying this area, destroying California. And I think we need to focus. I'm talking the extreme right and left.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. So I think that's where we all need to come together and okay, all of us normal people that are in the middle need to get the rest of the people out of here. And that's what we need to focus on.
Totally agreed. We don't want people that are, Casper Milquetoast up in Sacramento, but we do want people that are going to use, some common sense, aren't going to look at the person next to you as the enemy, but as a person who has an honest disagreement with you. And if you can look at that and realize that you don't have to agree on every issue, but there is common ground that we can find. And that's what I want to go to Sacramento, and that's what I'm looking for. I don't have this idea that I'm going to be able to go to Sacramento and solve every single problem. There are going to be some issues that we are going to agree to disagree on, but there are many issues. The crime issue that we talked about, the issue of the stewardship of our resources, our forests,
water.
I
mean, that's the biggest one that we need to deal with, because we have things in place to raise, to make more storage right now, but then there's all these environmental things that are in the way of it. We need to fix that. I mean, that's the biggest thing right there. You're talking about roads before, right? A good friend of mine, he works for the county, he's overseeing, and he's like, it takes me 22 to 25 years to rebuild a bridge that's already been there.
No, it
makes no sense at all. And that's the other problem we have. Everybody talks about affordable housing. But no one is doing anything. The biggest thing we can do is to take away a lot of these regulations that cause it to take up to 20 years to build a housing tract. If we could do that, we could build more homes. Homes would be not going up 22% a year. We knock it back down to our normal appreciation. I understand what's going on now with the supply chain and all that stuff, but eventually that's going to get fixed. And eventually a lot of this inflation that we have will subside, but not all of it. We're still going to be pretty high on inflation going forward. So I don't know where I was going with that statement, but I'm just saying,
no, you're right.
We need to get.
I was letting you go forward because it wasn't anything to disagree with.
Well, no, that's our biggest problem. We need to build more homes. I just saw in the paper we're going to build 600 apartments here in Modesto, but we need 1,000 homes being built back again in Modesto a year, not just 100. And this is the issue all over, because people, did you see all the homes being built in Patterson, or all the homes over? That's not enough. We're so far behind. You have no idea how far behind. And this has nothing to do with builder. Well, there are some builders who are building homes to rent, meaning the whole complex is being built to rent. This is money from REITs and other people and Google money and all this stuff. There's nothing to do about that, because eventually if these prices keep going up in California, 65 to 70% of the people have to rent for the rest of their lives. I don't want that. I want people to be able to own their home and have their own destiny from owning their own home and changing their lives, going forward, and have control, because the one thing you don't have control is when you rent.
Yep. And, it's really supply and demand. If you put enough regulation on it, you provide enough opportunity for lawyers to slow things down, they will. They make money off of that. So we need to cut the regulation. We need to expedite. I don't advocate not allowing a person to have their day in court, but we need to expedite the process so that decisions are made on a much faster basis. That's possible. It can be done, but we just have to have a commitment to speeding up the justice system. And at the same time, cut that regulation. Let the locals make the decisions. Local control. The best government is that government that comes from our cities. You don't have to like everyone, that's in office here. But ultimately, the best government is that from our cities and our supervisors. And yet, what are we seeing coming out around California? We've got a group of politicians in Sacramento. You talk about the 32 hours. Well, that's just that's just cutting the top edge of the nonsense that's coming out of Sacramento to regulate how businesses and how our local governments function. And really, the best government would be to have almost nothing coming from Sacramento and everything being decided by the Modesto City Council or the Board of Supervisors here in Stanislaus County, or even a regional group of government to get together to make regional decisions on how to make improvements to transportation. But, what do you get? You are constantly bombarded with what end up being stupid, ridiculous ideas out of Sacramento. We don't need their help. Those of us here in Stanislaus County need Stanislaus County to be freed up to address the problems that affect Stanislaus County.
Right. Because San Francisco has no idea what's going on over here.
Well,
no, I'm just saying the county wise, right? We don't know what's going on over there because
yeah.
So it needs to be regional, like you said. And I was so focused on the national election until we started talking to the local people and I'm like, wow, what a difference we can make. Because what happens in California is the starting point for the rest of the country, meaning that they look to see what they can get away with here in California, and then they do it for the rest of the country.
Oh, exactly. And we've been an incubator of good ideas,
mm-hmm.
but we've been the incubator of some really terrible ideas that have gone national.
Right. And this isn't about we're knocking everybody in Sacramento. We're just saying that there's some bad ideas up there. We've had some good ones, but it seems like there's a lot more. Like, where did that come from out of left field? Why do you think that's even any good at all? And we need to get back to what I saw with like the Virginia, was it the mayor or the governor, the Virginia governor? And I mean, mayor, hello, I'm screwing up today. Governor, it's coming out. The way he came in, he was so pro-business. We need to be more pro-business in California. You can still have your other programs, but we need to be more pro-business so that people stay in California. They push this agenda where they want to get rid of the oil industry, right? Because they want us to all go electric cars, but they don't talk about what does that battery do to the environment? How do they get those rare earth minerals? How they destroy the earth to get them? They don't even look at that. If these people who are so pushing doing electric cars really got behind how these batteries are made, they wouldn't let electric cars to come. These green people, all these people, if they really looked into it, they would say no more electric cars. Yeah,
they would first figure out how to do it environmentally friendly, both on the front end of getting the resources to make the batteries, but the batteries themselves are a pollution hazard in the end, because they don't just disappear.
Right. And they're the styrofoam. Yeah. Maybe we should. Those batteries are equal styrofoam. So now they'll get behind to get rid of them.
Yeah,
right?
Maybe.
Or they're. Oh no, I forgot. They're the straws. They're the plastic straws.
Yeah, well, that's so much more important.
That one turtle.
But I don't have a problem with as technology develops going electric. Ultimately, right. That might make some sense. But to artificially say, as the Air Resources Board said in the last couple of days, we're going to go 100% electric by 2035. Oh, really?
What grid are they getting? Not our grid.
Yeah. I mean, those batteries have to be recharged in some manner. We can't hardly provide electricity today just to keep our houses heated and air conditioned and the lights on. What are they going to do in 2035? How are we going to move, all the goods and all the services that we need moved around California in 2035? It just doesn't. It's poorly thought out, and it. And frankly, it doesn't seem to be thought out in terms of, what is the impact and the cost on, the poor and the middle class. It's kind of this upper crust. I'm a rich liberal and I can do it. Why can't you, who are making minimum wage? And by the way, you can only work 32 hours a month. So if you were you're now going to see, 20% of your wages that you used to earn go down, because as we pointed out early, businesses are going to figure this out. I mean, they're not going to be employing people over 32
31.
hours.
Go to 31.
You go to 31 and 59. So, at the end of the day, what we end up with is poorly thought out public policy. I haven't pointed out today, but one of the reasons I'm running for the legislature is that I'm really a policy guy. And when I say, I want to find common ground, I want to find common ground on policy solutions. At the end of the day, it's what we solve for the people of California. It's not, how many bills did we get passed? Let's look at the public policy. That's what the legislature is there to do, is to implement the overall policy.
And what public wants.
That the public
not
wants.
What you want. Public wants.
Exactly. Or some special interest that's paying to get you elected in the first place.
Right. A question for you. We didn't bring this on the radio show, but I wanted to ask you. One of the questions was about Governor Newsom's promising to create a new law allowing private citizens to sue anyone making or selling assault rifles. First of all, let's get something straight here. Nobody makes assault rifles. Let's get that straight. That's the dumbest thing. First of all, the wording, I just read that. I'm like, assault rifles. Really? There's no assault rifles. It's AR does not mean assault rifle. It means Amorite, the guy that originally made it. So basically, the question is, so they're looking to be able to sue them, kind of like they did with the Texas abortion law, right?
Yes.
So what do you think about that?
I think it's a dumb idea.
Well, what's new?
I mean,
the Second Amendment, I'm a totally Second Amendment guy, totally believe in free, be it right to bear arms, be able to have what you want. But they've done so many things in California to take that away from us. One, with ammunition, so they couldn't get rid of. These guns can only be made and brought into the state now if, from here forward, if they imprint this on the actual casing, which that's not even the technology that's available. So they keep all the new guns out.
Right.
So how are we going to fix this to get it back to, because I like Stanislaus County where, concealed weapons permit, if you need one, you can get one. And that's how it should be. Right. And
yeah, at the end of the bottom line here is that these proposals by the governor are going to get stricken. The Second Amendment is very clear. States and the federal government cannot abridge your right to keep and bear arms. To establish some type of law that is the Full Employment Act for lawyers. As a lawyer, I should say, this is a great idea, but it is another dumb idea to clog up our courts, and an idea whose day will never come. We'll strike it down.
I hope so. You still there?
I'm here.
Okay. I looked over here getting ready because I always have to look all over to see if people are making comments because they don't always come through the system. That's what that beep was. So okay. Anyway, so if I'm looking over here, I'm not focused on you. It's just I'm dealing with the stuff of being nobody else in the studio but me. So
sure.
Anyway, keep going. Was there anything else you want to add to that?
Not at this point.
Okay. All right. So
That's why I stopped.
Well, I'm not used to you stopping. I'm used to having to stop you. All right. So what else? All right. So we've been doing this for about 47 minutes. I don't know if you know that. So basically, we normally go about 30. So we're over that, which I'm okay with. Was there anything else you wanted to talk about before we go today?
Well, let's talk about the combination of experience that I bring to the table here, because really the public is interviewing. That's what an election process is. It's the interview and then deciding who you want to hire as your next state senator. And I think what's unique about me is that I started as in the executive branch as a deputy director in the State Department of Social Services. I was appointed there by then Governor George Deukmejian. I was proud to serve him for 7.5 years. I spent 18 years out in the private sector as a lawyer, and kind of a unique situation because most Republicans don't represent criminal defendants. I was a criminal defense attorney, did extensive work defending small businesses before state administrative agencies, in the administrative law area. So I take experience within the executive sector of government to the private sector. I can't even imagine how many paychecks I've signed now over the last 40 years. And I've seen, quite frankly, some of the things that I was involved in as a executive sector person in the state. After I started practicing law, I started scratching my head. That's why I have no hair, because there were things that we did in the 1980s that I had to live with in the 1990s. So it gave me a perspective of, there are consequences to the decisions that you make in the executive branch. Then I spent 8.5 years as a Superior Court judge, elected in 2009, 2008 actually, took office in 2009. Spent 8.5 years as a Superior Court judge handling nearly every kind of assignment that you can have as a Superior Court judge, including criminal trials, civil trials, probate, I was the dependency presiding judge for 4.5 years. While I served on the bench, I did some family law, realized some of the issues that people are confronted with on the family law side. I'd done adoptions. So there's very little that I didn't do on the bench. I retired in 2018 or 17, ran for Attorney General in 2018, had an opportunity to travel throughout California talking to incredibly decent people, Republicans, Democrats, independents, and did well in the election, didn't win. But again, that was the interview process. The public decided to hire someone else to be the Attorney General. And now I'm here running for state Senate. The only area that I haven't served in is the legislative branch. I'm looking forward to being elected to the state Senate. I'm proud to be going through this interview.
The one thing about you saying you're supposed to interview people running for politics, I think that's the biggest problem that voters don't do, right? They don't find out who each person is. They guess sometimes, or they don't, and as you said, with the executive branch, you had to live with the consequences, from what you did in the 80s, in the 90s. We have these consequences that we have to live with when you vote for the wrong person.
That's right.
And that's what's happening right now. You need to make sure voting has, the only thing I quote from Obama is voting has consequences, right? I'm sorry, because it was the best thing he said. And it is so true to this day. You need to know what you're voting for. If you don't understand what it is and you don't get the information on it, don't check the box. Move on. If you don't know who the people are that are going for a certain district for state Senate if you don't know who those people are, don't vote, because your vote could be the one thing that went the other way that shouldn't be there. Yeah, so if you don't understand what you're voting for, please don't vote.
That's right. I mean, and that's why we go through this process. That's why a candidate needs to get out and be available to their potential constituents. It's also a clear indication that if you can't find out information about a candidate running, you probably aren't going to find out what they're doing when they're in office,
right?
Because they're not going to be available to you.
Right.
And you're hiring somebody that's there to represent your interests, regardless of what political philosophy you may be. You're still looking for someone that's going to, one, listen to you, and two, do their best to try to implement policy and look for the common ground that we all have as humans. I mean, we've proven it over, millennia that we can at times get together and work together. We don't have to agree on everything. And, so I'm looking forward to going to Sacramento to represent Stanislaus County and the other 12 counties that we've got in this 4th state Senate district. Yeah,
it's amazing how big that district is now. But I want to thank you for coming on the show today. I really appreciate it. And good luck in the election. You have what it needs for this position. You have the background. You have certain things that you've dealt with nobody else that's in the race besides you have dealt with. So good luck in winning this District 4.
And we're going to work our tails off.
All right. And thanks. And if somebody wants to reach out to you, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Probably the very best way is to go to our website. That's baileyforsenate.net. That's BAILEYFORSENATE.net.
All right. We'll have it in the show notes, so don't worry about that. All right, sir. Thank you so much for being here, and have a great day.
Thank you.